Don't eat that. The words came out of me loud enough to cut through the cabin hum. My mother's hand froze inches above the tray. What is it, Jamal? She asked. Her voice was calm, trusting, the kind of calm that comes from not seeing the danger right in front of you. The plane kept moving like nothing was wrong. Engine steady. Seatbelt sign off. Passengers murmuring. Plastic cups clinking. Everything felt normal. Nothing was. I leaned forward and grabbed the tray before her fingers touched the food. Mom, stop. She pulled her hand back slowly. What's wrong? She asked again. I stared down at the meal. The smell hit first. Not airline food, bland. Rotten. Sour in the back of my throat, like something that had been cooked, cooled, forgotten, then reheated out of obligation instead of care. The chicken looked wrong. Not dry. Wet. Gray around the edges. The vegetables were collapsed, swimming in cloudy liquid that smelled like metal and neglect. Then I saw it. Mold. Small, white, threaded along the chicken bone like it had been growing there before we even boarded. My chest tightened. I did lower my voice. You served my blind mother rotten food. Head snapped toward us. A few passengers leaned into the aisle. A flight attendant stopped mid-step, white early 30s tight bun, name tag Sarah. Sir, is there a problem? She asked. I held the tray up. You tell me. She glanced down, quick, dismissive, then looked back up. It looks fine. That was it. That was the snap. Fine, I said sharply, you think mold is fine. Her expression tightened. If there's an issue, I can replace the meal. No, I said immediately, you can explain why you thought this was okay to give to her. Sarah exhaled through her nose. Sir, it's the same meal everyone received. That's when it clicked. She didn't need to look. This wasn't about the food. This was about who was sitting in the seat. I leaned closer, lowering my voice just enough to carry. Smell it. She hesitated. I don't need to. Smell it. Passengers were watching now. A man across the aisle pulled his headphones off. Sarah leaned in, sniffed quickly, then straightened up. It smells normal. I laughed short, sharp. My mother is blind, I said, not delusional. My mom shifted in her seat. Jamal, she said softly, I just felt something was wrong. Sarah crossed her arms. Ma'am, catering wouldn't load spoiled food. My mother turned her head toward Sarah's voice. I didn't accuse anyone, she said calmly. I said something was wrong. Sarah's tone hardened. Well, sometimes people imagine things. That word landed heavy. People. I snapped the tray table shut. The sound cracked through the cabin. Say that again. Sarah stiffened. I said mistakes happen. No, I said quietly, you said people imagine things. Another flight attendant stepped in, taller, older, confident, name tag Brian. What seems to be the issue? He asked. Sarah answered fast. They're claiming the food is spoiled. I corrected her instantly. You served my blind black mother rotten food. Brian finally looked at my mother. Really looked. Dark glasses. White cane tucked between her legs. Straight posture, no apology in her body. Then he looked back at me. We haven't had any other complaints, he said. I gestured down the aisle. Then why do other meals look different? Brian frowned. What do you mean? I pointed. That chicken is brown, that one's steaming, that one smells like seasoning. I lifted the tray again. You gave her leftovers. A murmur rolled through the cabin. That's not how airline catering works, Brian said flatly. My mother spoke again. I cooked for my family for 40 years, she said evenly. Blindness doesn't erase memory, I know when food has spoiled. Brian didn't answer her. He looked at me. Sir, you're becoming disruptive. That word hit hard. Disruptive. Not concerned. Not wronged. Not protective. Disruptive. You disrespected my mother, I said slowly, and I'm the problem. Sarah scoffed. We offered to replace it. No, I snapped, you offered to act like it didn't happen. Brian straightened. If you're unhappy, we can receipt you. Receipt us, I repeated, after serving her rotten food. Brian's jaw tightened. Sir, please lower your voice. That's when I understood. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't scared. They were confident. Confident her blindness made her vulnerable. Confident her blackness made her invisible. Confident altitude would protect them. I pulled my phone out. Say that again, I said, lifting it. Brian's eyes flicked to the screen. Recording isn't allowed on board. Say it again. I turned to the cabin. They served my blind mother spoiled food, I said loudly, and told us to move seats instead of apologizing. A woman across the aisle leaned in and sniffed the tray. Oh my God, she said, that smells bad. Another passenger shook his head. That's not right. Sarah's face drained of color. Brian stiffened. Sir, you need to stop. No. My mother reached for my arm. Jamal, she whispered, I don't want trouble. I squeezed her hand. This isn't trouble, I said, this is dignity. Brian stepped back. I'm calling the purser. That word landed like a warning. Purser. I leaned down to my mother. They think this ends in the air, I said quietly. They think we land and everyone forgets. She nodded once. They're wrong. The intercom chimed. And before the purser even reached our row, I knew something was coming. Something that would ground more than this flight. Something that would cost careers. So don't go anywhere, because what happened next ended jobs at 30,000 feet. I sat back down. Not because I was finished, but because I knew exactly what I was doing next. The cabin was quiet in that unnatural way planes get when something isn't right but no one wants to admit it yet. Conversations had dropped to whispers. A few passengers pretended to scroll through their phones while watching us in the reflection of the overhead bins. My mother sat upright beside me, hands folded neatly in her lap. Still calm. Still dignified. Still treated like the problem. I leaned in close so only she could hear me. Mom, I said quietly, I'm going to handle this. She nodded once. I trust you, she said. That trust sat heavy in my chest. I turned back toward the aisle. Sarah had stepped a few rows away, whispering urgently to another crew member. Brian stood farther up, arms crossed, watching me like I was a situation he needed to manage, not a person protecting his mother. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Brian, I said evenly, I want the purser. He exhaled, already irritated. They're aware of the situation. That's not what I said, I replied. I want to speak to them here. He hesitated. Passengers noticed. Power hates hesitation. We're in the air, he said finally. This can wait until landing. I shook my head slowly. No, I said, it can't. He stared at me, measuring. I stayed still. That's the thing, people don't expect stillness. They expect shouting, threats, a scene. Stillness makes them nervous. Why can't it wait? Brian asked. I held his gaze. Because my blind mother was served spoiled food, I said calmly, and your crew implied she imagined it. A woman across the aisle sucked in a breath. Brian glanced at her, then back at me. I didn't imply. You didn't correct it either, I said. Silence. That's when I delivered the promise. Low, clear, unavoidable. I'm not here to argue, I said. I'm here to make sure this is documented properly. That sentence changed the air. Documented. Brian straightened. There's no need for that, he said quickly. We can resolve this internally. I smiled slightly. That's exactly what you said, I replied, before you asked us to move seats. My mother shifted beside me. I don't need special treatment, she said calmly. I just don't want to be treated like I don't exist. The woman across the aisle nodded slowly. Brian cleared his throat. I'll notify the purser, he said. Thank you, I replied. He turned and walked toward the front. The cabin breathed again, but it wasn't relief. It was anticipation. I picked up my phone, unlocked it, and placed it face down on the tray table. Not recording. Just visible. Sarah noticed. Her step slowed. She approached carefully, voice lowered. Sir, she said, we're doing our best to accommodate you. I looked up at her. Accommodate, I repeated. I didn't ask for accommodation. She pressed her lips together. I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding. That word again. Misunderstanding. There wasn't, I said gently. There was spoiled food and a choice. She glanced at my mother. Then back at me. We would never intentionally. I know, I said, that's what makes this worse. Her brow furrowed. I leaned in just enough. Negligence doesn't need intent, I said quietly, it just needs indifference. She swallowed. I'll bring you another meal, she said. No, I replied, thank you, we're done eating. She nodded unsure and walked away. I turned back to my mother. You okay? I asked. I am, she said, but I can feel the tension. I smiled faintly. That's because it's working. She tilted her head. You planned this. I shook my head. No, I said, but once it started, I knew how it had to go. The intercom chimed softly. A few passengers looked up. Footsteps moved down the aisle. Measured, confident. The purser stopped at our row. White woman mid-40s composed, name tag Linda. Good afternoon, she said, I understand there's been an issue. Yes, I replied calmly, there has. She looked at my mother. Then at the tray table. Then at me. May I hear your side, she asked. I nodded. You will, I said, and so will the report. Her eyes flicked to my phone. Then back to my face. I didn't raise it. I didn't need to. My mother is blind, I began evenly. She was served food that had spoiled. When she questioned it, your crew dismissed her concern and implied she imagined it. Linda's expression tightened slightly. That's not acceptable, she said. I held her gaze. Then I assume you'll document it as such. She paused. We'll review the matter, she said carefully. That's not documentation, I replied, that's delay. The cabin was silent now. Every word carried. Linda clasped her hands. What would you like to happen, she asked. I took a breath. This was the calmest I'd been all flight. I want 3 things, I said. She nodded. First, I continued, I want this incident logged under catering and crew response. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Second, I said, I want confirmation that my mother's disability was noted and disregarded. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. And third, I said, I want assurance this won't be minimized once we land. Linda inhaled slowly. That's a serious set of requests, she said. So was serving her that food, I replied. She studied me. You're very calm, she said. I have to be, I answered, you control the altitude. That landed. She nodded once. I'll make a report, she said, but we don't make determinations mid-flight. I'm not asking for determinations, I replied, I'm asking for truth. Silence again. She turned to my mother. Ma'am, she said gently, I'm sorry for what you experienced. My mother nodded. Thank you, she said, I just want to be treated like everyone else. Linda straightened. You deserve that, she said. Then she looked at me. I'll return shortly, she added. As she walked away, the cabin didn't relax. It leaned in. I looked down at my phone again. Still face down. Still silent. But no longer invisible. My mother reached for my hand. You didn't raise your voice once, she said quietly. I didn't need to, I replied, they heard me. She squeezed my fingers. Whatever happens, she said, I'm proud of you. I swallowed. That meant more than any apology. The seatbelt sign chimed. The plane adjusted altitude slightly. Somewhere ahead of us, decisions were being made. Not loud ones. Paper decisions. Report decisions. Career decisions. I stared straight ahead. And for the first time since we boarded, I felt certain of one thing. They were no longer in control of how this story ended. And what came next would decide everything. Linda didn't come back alone. I knew that before I even looked up. The sound of footsteps in an airplane aisle tells you everything: speed, weight, intention. These weren't hurried, they weren't casual either, they were deliberate, measured, the kind of steps people take when they already decided something and just need to deliver it. Brian was with her. Sarah followed a few rows behind. The formation said enough. Linda stopped at our row. Mr. Johnson, she said evenly, may we speak privately near the galley? There it was. The first attempt to relocate the problem. I didn't raise my voice. No, I said, we can speak here. Her expression tightened slightly. This is a sensitive matter, she replied. So is discrimination, I said calmly, and that already happened here. A few passengers stiffened. Linda glanced around, then back at me. We don't agree that discrimination occurred. That word. Agree. As if truth was optional. That's okay, I replied. I'm not asking for agreement. Brian shifted beside her. Sir, he said, you're escalating this. I looked at him slowly. No, I said, I'm numbing it. Silence dropped hard. My mother sat still beside me, hands folded, chin lifted. She didn't need to see what was happening. She could hear it. She could feel the air change. Linda clasped her hands. Let's start from the beginning, she said. I nodded. Good, I replied, because that's where the injustice happened. I picked up the tray again. Carefully. Not theatrically. This meal, I said, holding it level, was spoiled. That's not an opinion. Multiple passengers confirmed the smell. A woman across the aisle nodded immediately. Yes, she said, it was bad. Linda acknowledged her with a brief glance, then returned to me. When my mother questioned it, I continued, your crew dismissed her concern. Sarah inhaled sharply. That's not. You said, I interrupted calmly, sometimes people imagine things. Sarah froze. Brian looked at her. Linda turned slowly. Did you say that? Linda asked. Sarah's mouth opened. I meant. You implied, I said evenly, that my blind mother couldn't trust her own senses. The word blind hung in the air. Linda exhaled slowly. That's not acceptable, she said. But it happened, I replied, and then it got worse. Brian crossed his arms. How, he asked. You labeled me disruptive, I said, not concerned, not protective, disruptive. Brian's jaw tightened. That's standard terminology. For who, I asked, people who question authority. A murmur rippled through the cabin. Linda raised a hand slightly. Please continue, she said. I nodded. When we objected, I said, you offered to move us, not to apologize, not to document, to move us. Linda didn't respond. That's displacement, I continued. That's silencing, and when I asked for documentation, you resisted. Brian shook his head. We followed procedure. Procedure isn't neutral, I replied, it protects whoever wrote it. That landed. Linda looked directly at me now. You're making serious accusations, she said. Yes, I replied, because serious harm occurred. My mother spoke then. Her voice was steady. They treated my blindness like a liability, she said, like it made me unreliable. Linda turned toward her fully. I'm very sorry, she said. I don't want your sympathy, my mother replied, I want your honesty. That shifted something. Linda straightened. Mrs. Johnson, she said, no one intended to disrespect you. My mother tilted her head. Intent doesn't erase impact, she said. A man a few rows back nodded slowly. That's right, he said quietly. The cabin wasn't passive anymore. It was aligned. Brian cleared his throat. Linda, he said, we need to de-escalate. I looked at him. You tried that already, I said, by minimizing. Linda held up a hand. No, she said, we're past that. She turned back to me. What exactly are you alleging? She asked. I didn't hesitate. Disability-based dismissal, I said, racial bias in response, and misuse of authority to suppress a valid complaint. The words were clean. Precise. Undeniable. Sarah swallowed hard. That's not fair, she whispered. I looked at her. What's not fair, I said, is serving spoiled food to someone you assume won't fight back. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know, she said. That's the problem, I replied, you didn't bother to know. The snap wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was clarity. Linda took a long breath. I will be documenting this as a formal incident, she said finally. Brian turned to her sharply. Linda. She cut him off. This will include catering failure, she continued, and crew response. Brian stiffened. And the language used, I added. She nodded. And the language used, she confirmed. Sarah looked down. The cabin was silent again, but this time it wasn't tension. It was judgment. Linda looked at me. Is there anything else, she asked. Yes, I said. She waited. I want it clear, I continued, that my mother's blindness was not the issue. Linda nodded. The issue, I said, was how your crew responded to it. She wrote something on her tablet. I also want to be clear, I added, that recording was discouraged while authority was being misused. Brian shifted uncomfortably. Linda paused, then typed again. Noted, she said. I exhaled slowly. That was the escalation. Not yelling. Not threats. Documentation. Accountability. My mother squeezed my hand. You stayed calm, she said quietly. That's how you make them listen, I replied. Linda looked at both of us. I'll be following up after landing, she said. You'll be contacted directly. I nodded. We'll be waiting, I said. She turned to leave. Then stopped. I want to apologize, she said, voice quieter now, for how this was handled. My mother inclined her head. Thank you, she said. I accept accountability, not excuses. Linda nodded once and walked away. The cabin slowly exhaled. People looked at us differently now. Not as a disturbance. As a line that had been crossed and pushed back. Brian lingered a moment longer. This didn't have to go this far, he said quietly. I met his eyes. It went exactly as far as it needed to, I replied. He walked away. I sat back. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. That's how I knew I'd done it right. The injustice had been named. Not emotionally. Not vaguely. By its actions. And once injustice is named in a place like this, 30,000 feet in the air, surrounded by witnesses, it doesn't disappear. It follows people home. It shows up in reports. In meetings. In consequences. I looked straight ahead as the plane continued its path through the sky. And for the first time since this started, I knew something for certain. This wasn't over. But it was no longer in their control. After Linda walked away, the cabin didn't go back to normal. That was the first thing I noticed. People returned to their screens, their books, their drinks, but the energy stayed suspended. Like the plane itself was holding its breath. The engines hummed steadily, indifferent, but the humans inside were alert now. Watching. Waiting. My mother rested her hands on her lap, still, centered, her breathing slow and even. You okay? I asked quietly. Yes, she said, I feel lighter. I nodded. That made sense. The moment you're believed, something lifts. The tray table was still down, empty now, no food, just space. Space mattered. Silence mattered. Sarah didn't come back. Neither did Brian. That absence was loud. Flight attendants passed our row, but their eyes avoided us, not out of fear but recalibration. The way people act when a hierarchy shifts slightly and they're not sure where the line is anymore. I didn't touch my phone. Didn't need to. The invisible snap had already happened. The seatbelt sign chimed on. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm, routine, unaware of the recalculation happening behind row 23. We'll be beginning our descent shortly. Descent. That's when the pivot always happens. In the air, authority feels absolute. On the ground, everything gets audited. My mother leaned toward me. They know this doesn't end here, she said softly. Yes, I replied, and that's why they're quiet. Silence is rarely peace. Most of the time, it's paperwork forming. Linda came back once more before landing. Alone this time. She stopped beside us, not blocking the aisle, not looming, that was intentional. I've filed the initial report, she said quietly. I nodded. It will be reviewed upon landing, she continued. You'll receive a follow-up within 48 hours. I didn't respond immediately. That pause mattered. Thank you, I said finally. She hesitated. There may be additional questions, she added. There always are, I replied. She nodded once and moved on. No apology this time. Just process. That was the pivot. When injustice moves from conversation into systems, people start protecting themselves. The wheels touched down with a jolt. A few passengers clapped reflexively, others didn't. Phones came out. Belts clicked open. The illusion of normalcy rushed back in, but something had shifted underneath it. We waited. Let people pass. No rush. Pressure doesn't move fast. As we stood, a woman from across the aisle leaned over. I saw everything, she said quietly, if you need a statement. I met her eyes. Thank you, I said, I may. She nodded and disappeared into the aisle. 2 rows up, a man paused. That wasn't right, he said, what they did. No, I agreed, it was. He gave a tight nod and left. Witnesses don't always intervene loudly. Sometimes they line up later. We stepped into the jet bridge. The air felt different there, heavier, grounded. At the gate, uniformed staff stood near the podium, smiling, polite, neutral. Linda was already speaking with one of them, low voices, tablets out. She saw us and stopped. Mr. Johnson, she said, ma'am. She gestured slightly toward the podium. Would you mind waiting a moment? I looked at my mother. She nodded. We waited. Passengers flowed around us, pretending not to stare. Brian emerged from the cockpit area. He didn't look at us. He spoke quietly to Linda, then walked away. That told me enough. Linda returned. There will be a customer relations supervisor joining us shortly, she said. Of course, I replied. More silence. Pressure builds best when no one rushes it. A man in a suit approached, name badge clipped to his jacket, Tom. Good afternoon, he said, I'm with customer relations. I nodded. We've been briefed, he continued, but I'd like to hear from you directly. I glanced at my mother. She spoke first. I was served food that had spoiled, she said calmly. When I questioned it, my concern was dismissed. When my son spoke up, he was treated like the problem. Tom nodded slowly. I'm sorry that happened, he said. Then he looked at me. What outcome are you seeking, he asked. That question is always the pivot. People expect anger. They expect compensation requests. They expect noise. I gave him none of that. Accountability, I said. He blinked. Specifically, he asked. That this incident is not buried, I replied. That disability and bias training isn't theoretical, that your crew understands the difference between authority and arrogance. Tom inhaled slowly. That's a serious concern, he said. Yes, I replied, it is. He nodded. We'll be reviewing crew conduct, he said. Good, I replied. And catering, he added. Yes, I agreed. And communication, he finished. I didn't say anything. Silence again. My mother adjusted her grip on her cane. That's all, she said quietly. Tom looked at her. You're sure, he asked. She nodded. I didn't ask to be treated specially, she said. I asked not to be dismissed. Tom straightened. I understand, he said. He handed me a card. Please follow up with me directly, he added. I took it. Thank you, I said. He stepped back. Linda lingered a moment. I meant what I said earlier, she told my mother. You deserved better. My mother inclined her head. I know, she said. We walked away. Down the terminal. Past gates and screens and advertisements promising comfort and care. Outside, the noise returned, luggage wheels, announcements, footsteps. Life resumed. But consequences don't announce themselves. They unfold quietly. In meetings. In emails. In schedules adjusted. In careers redirected. My mother took my arm. You didn't raise your voice once, she said again. No, I replied, I raised the stakes. She smiled. That's different, she said. Yes, I agreed, it is. As we stepped outside the terminal, my phone buzzed. One notification. An email. Subject line, incident reference number. I didn't open it. Not yet. Some things land heavier when you let them sit. We stopped walking. Just for a moment. No words. No movement. People passed around us, dragging luggage, answering calls, returning to their lives. The noise came back all at once, but it didn't reach us. That's when I realized something important. They weren't arguing anymore. They weren't explaining. They weren't minimizing. They were protecting themselves. And that's the pivot. I looked at my mother. She stood quietly beside me, one hand resting on her cane, the other lightly touching my arm, steady, unbothered, grounded. You feel it too, I asked. Yes, she said, they're done talking. I nodded. Silence had replaced resistance. And silence, when it comes after pressure, is never empty. It's preparation. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without opening the email. We started walking again. Slowly. Deliberately. Behind us, through the glass, the aircraft sat motionless at the gate, clean, quiet, pretending nothing had happened. But I knew better. Because once something is documented, it doesn't disappear. It moves. Through inboxes. Through meetings. Through quiet conversations that start with, "Did you see this report?" and end with decisions no one announces publicly. I stopped once more and turned slightly, not toward the plane but toward the truth of it. If accountability matters to you, subscribe. Because what happened after this didn't stay quiet. By the time the emails stopped, careers were already ending. And it didn't happen the way anyone expected. 3 days after we landed, the first email came in. No subject line I recognized. No apology in the preview. Just a reference number and a sentence that felt heavier than it looked. "We are reviewing the incident you reported." That was it. No emotion. No defensiveness. No reassurance. That's how you know something real has started. I didn't open it right away. I read it again slowly. Then I forwarded it to a folder I created and named documentation. Pressure works best when it's organized. My mother sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. "They reached out?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She nodded once. "Good," she replied, "that means someone had to write it down." That was her language for accountability. Writing things down changes behavior. 2 hours later, another email arrived. Different sender. Longer. More careful. They thanked us for our patience. They assured us the matter was being escalated. They emphasized values. I read it all. Then I noticed what wasn't there. No denial. No suggestion that we misunderstood. No defense of crew actions. That absence mattered more than anything they said. The next morning the call came. Block number. I let it ring once. Then twice. Then answered. "Mr. Johnson," a voice asked. "Yes." "This is corporate compliance." Compliance. Not customer service. That word doesn't show up unless someone is nervous. "I'd like to ask you a few follow-up questions," she said. Of course, I replied. The questions were precise. Who said what? When? How many witnesses? Exact phrasing. She asked about tone. About body language. About the moment the word imagine was used. I answered calmly. Truth doesn't need volume. At one point she paused. Was your mother's blindness disclosed to the crew? She asked. Yes, I said, it was visible. Silence. That's important, she said quietly. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That afternoon, another email arrived. This one included an attachment request. Passenger statements. I smiled faintly. Witnesses had already begun lining up. By evening, 2 messages sat in my inbox from people I didn't know. I was on that flight. I saw what happened. If you need anything, I'm willing to help. I forwarded them all. Documentation grows fast once it's invited. The airline didn't contact us for 2 days after that. That silence wasn't avoidance. It was internal. Meetings were happening. I knew because of how the language shifted when they finally wrote again. Following an internal review. Based on preliminary findings. Appropriate action has been taken. They never say who in those emails. They never say how. But they say taken. That's the word you watch for. My mother read over my shoulder. They won't name names, she said. No, I replied, they never do. She sipped her tea. But someone's already packing a locker, she added. I didn't correct her. 2 weeks after the flight, a formal letter arrived by mail. Thick envelope. Heavy paper. That kind of paper costs money. Which means someone wanted it to feel serious. They acknowledged the incident. They acknowledged failure. They acknowledged harm. They apologized formally, carefully, legally. They outlined steps. Retraining. Policy review. Catering audit. Crew reassignment. Reassignment. That word sat quietly in the middle of the page. Not termination. Not discipline. Reassignment. But reassignment isn't neutral. It's a pause. It's a flag. It's a mark on a file that follows you. My mother folded the letter neatly. They didn't say sorry to feel better, she said. they said it because they had to. Yes, I agreed, because it's documented. A week later, a former flight attendant messaged me privately. I didn't recognize the name. I'm not supposed to reach out, the message began. I read it twice. I wasn't on your flight, but I know who was. Things changed after that report. Schedules, evaluations, opportunities. I stared at the screen. People noticed, the message continued. That's all I can say. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The system was doing what systems do when exposed. Correcting itself quietly. Another month passed. Life moved on. But accountability doesn't expire quickly. One afternoon, I searched the airline's internal postings, publicly visible roles. A familiar name wasn't there anymore. Then another. Then another. No announcements. No explanations. Just absence. That's how careers usually end. Not with headlines. With disappearance. My mother noticed before I said anything. They're gone, aren't they? She asked. Yes, I replied. She nodded slowly. I don't feel happy about it, she said. Neither do I admitted. She looked at me. But I feel at peace. That mattered more. We never asked for revenge. We asked for accountability. And accountability doesn't need celebration. It needs change. Months later, a final email came. Short. Closed language. This matter is considered resolved. Resolved. For them. For us, it became something else. A reminder. A reference point. A line we now knew how to draw. One evening, my mother said something that stayed with me. They didn't expect you, she said. No, I replied. They expected silence, she continued. Yes. She smiled faintly. And silence didn't come. I shook my head. No, I said, pressure did. That's the difference. Silence can be used against you. Pressure can't. The injustice on that plane wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It didn't involve shouting or handcuffs or viral clips. It involved assumption, dismissal, and the belief that certain people won't push back. That belief cost people their jobs. Not because we demanded it, but because systems don't tolerate exposure. Once you name something clearly, disability dismissal, racial bias, misuse of authority, it stops being invisible. And once it's visible, it has consequences. That's the part they never warn you about. I don't tell the story to feel righteous. I tell it because it's instructive. Because someone listening might recognize the moment. The smell that isn't right. The tone that shifts. The authority that leans too hard. And maybe they'll remember this. That calm works. That documentation works. That silence, when paired with pressure, bends institutions. My mother still flies. She still trusts her instincts. And I still sit beside her. Watching. Not waiting for injustice. But ready for it. Because now we know something important. At 30,000 feet or on the ground, accountability doesn't arrive on its own. It arrives when someone refuses to be dismissed. Time passed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just enough for the sharp edges of the moment to dull and for the meaning of it to settle. That's how real experiences age. They don't replay themselves loudly. They reorganize you quietly. My mother and I never spoke about the incident every day. We didn't need to. The lesson wasn't something that required repetition. It lived in how she moved afterward, in how she trusted herself a little more openly, in how she no longer questioned whether her discomfort was valid. That mattered. One afternoon, weeks later, she stood in the kitchen holding a piece of fruit. She paused, smelled it, then set it aside. This one's bad, she said calmly. No hesitation. No apology. I smiled. What? She asked. Nothing, I replied, just noticing. She nodded knowingly. People think blindness means uncertainty, she said. It doesn't. That sentence stayed with me. Because what happened on that plane wasn't really about food. It was about certainty. About who is allowed to trust themselves. About whose discomfort gets taken seriously. About who is expected to stay quiet so other people don't feel challenged. The airline corrected itself. That's true. Policies were reviewed. Training was updated. Careers shifted. But institutions don't change because they suddenly become moral. They change because someone makes ignoring the truth expensive. That's the part no one advertises. People like stories where justice feels cinematic, loud, immediate, satisfying. But real accountability rarely looks like that. It looks like emails instead of arguments, silence instead of shouting, documentation instead of outrage. It looks boring. And because it looks boring, people underestimate it. That's why injustice survives. Most people are waiting for permission to speak. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for someone louder. Waiting for certainty. But certainty doesn't arrive before you act. It arrives because you did. My mother never wanted an apology tour. She never wanted attention. She wanted to be treated like a full human being. That's it. And what I learned watching her through that process, calm, composed, unflinching, was this. Dignity doesn't announce itself. It holds its ground. The world is structured to reward silence, especially from people it assumes won't push back. That assumption is the real danger. Because once someone realizes you're willing to stay calm and still apply pressure, the rules change. Authority listens differently. Institutions respond differently. People remember your name. Not because you were loud, but because you were precise. I didn't tell this story because it's unique. I told it because it's familiar. Because someone listening has already felt the moment before it snaps. The off smell. The dismissive tone. The subtle shift where your concern becomes your problem. And maybe next time they'll recognize it faster. Maybe they'll stay calm. Maybe they'll document. Maybe they'll refuse to be moved, minimized, or managed away. That's how change actually spreads. Not through outrage alone, but through example. My mother still flies. She still eats carefully. She still trusts herself. And I still sit beside her not as a shield but as a witness. Because the goal isn't to fight every injustice. The goal is to make sure the next one doesn't happen as easily. That's the landing. Not victory. Not revenge. Clarity. And clarity changes behavior. If this story stayed with you not because it was dramatic but because it felt familiar, then stay with me. Subscribe. Because this isn't the only time authority gets it wrong. And it won't be the last time someone is expected to stay quiet. This channel exists for the moments when silence is convenient. And accountability is necessary. Stay. Because the stories that matter most are the ones that teach you how to stand your ground. Without losing yourself.